Hey friends, let's talk about something that keeps way too many of us up at night, and that's royalties. If you're a label owner, you know what I mean. The spreadsheets, the formulas, the endless anxiety about whether you're getting it right. Are you calculating things correctly? Are your artists happy? How do you even start to stay organized as your catalog grows? That's why I want to tell you about Infinite Catalog, the royalty accounting tool that's changing the game for indie labels. Labels like Merge, DFA Records, and Mexican Summer swear by it, and for good reason. With Infinite Catalog, royalty accounting gets broken down into 4 easy steps. Number 1, you build your catalog automatically. Just upload your revenue data, and they handle the rest. Number 2, let the math handle itself. Balances calculate automatically. No more, what do we owe and who do we owe, blah, blah, blah. Number 3, show your artists everything. Give them access to their earnings data, building transparency and trust. And number 4, pay with confidence. Pay artists how and when you want, and let Infinite Catalog keep it all balanced. And here's the best part. To kick off 2025, Infinite Catalog is offering 50% off your first 3 months, plus a 14-day free trial. You can upload as much data as you want during the trial, and IC will help you sort it all out. So, stop letting royalties stress you out. Get your accounting in order and build stronger relationships with your artists. Head to infinitecatalog.com and start your free trial today. Your future self and your artists will thank you. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Other Record Labels, where we talk about the art and culture of running an independent record label. And today I'm interviewing the UK label Analogue Trash. What a great name for a record label. I think it's great. Anyway, we're going to talk all about treating your artists as family. We're going to talk about the various stages of being a record label. We're going to do what we've been doing for 7 or 8 years here on this show, and just talking about running a record label. I hope you enjoy. One of the great things about your label, as I was looking through things, is it says on your website, it would normally say roster or it would normally say artist, but it says family. Talk us through that decision, and what does that mean to you to refer to your artists as family?
So we try to run the label in like a really community-focused way. So the sort of the overarching idea, I guess, is that, like, a rising tide lifts all boats. So
yes,
the idea is that as well as sort of joining a record label in the traditional sense, you're also joining like a community of artists, and we're really sort of keen on the idea of like mutual support, of sort of working together, of sharing sort of gig lineups, of like collaborating, of remixing each other, that kind of thing. And the idea is that, we can sort of crowdsource support essentially by having a whole bunch of people on the label who are working towards a common goal.
That's such an interesting idea. I'm familiar with that expression, but I hadn't really put it in the context of the label and the label community. But I mean, that history is the same history as mine. I didn't really know anything about record labels. What I knew at the time was I'm doing this on my own, and then my friend's band is doing it on their own. And they have a small online following and a small local following, as do I. What happens if we just put those together? We're now the power of 2, and then the power of 3, then the power of 4. And it actually happened where my fans were like, I also like this band, and vice versa. That's such an overlooked benefit of being a collective or being a record label.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's one of the biggest selling points for an artist, I'd say, for joining a small label. I think these days, if you have the networks and the knowledge and the time and energy, you could probably be fine without a label. Like, you don't need one to succeed as an artist, like maybe in the olden days you did.
Sure.
But one of the advantages that you have joining a small label is that you join a family of artists. You have that sort of people power. You have people around you who are in the same situation who you can support, and vice versa. And I think when I'm sort of when I'm meeting artists to talk about possibly working with us from a label perspective, that's one of the things I'll talk to them about. Is that sort of community side of things what you're looking for? Because I think from an artist side, they get a lot more out of being on the label as well if they're happy to sort of jump in and be part of the bigger picture.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. And I mean, that's interesting too, because you talk about the barriers for entry to being a self-releasing artist compared to, even just, 15 years ago, when you were starting, but anybody can get on digital distribution. You can get on Spotify easily. You can open your own Bandcamp for free. You can even the pressing plants will talk to an independent artist and make a record with them. There's so many things you can do. You can book studio time as an independent artist. But you can't create community. You can't penetrate an existing community. As that's the one thing that they can't do on their own. That's very interesting. I never thought of that.
I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think. I think. No, you're right. I think it is kind of overlooked, and pretty much everyone that we've worked with who's approached us to release their music has said that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, that's right. And I remember speaking with an artist who was consulting with me, and it wasn't about him starting a record label. It was about what he could do as an artist to get on a record label, to find a record label. And I kind of asked him, I was curious. I was like, why do you want a record label? Because like you say, a lot of it you could do on your own, especially if you're ambitious and you know how to use a computer. And the three things were money, like, some sort of help with funding something, the exposure to perhaps like the contacts that you might have. And then the third thing was community, having label mates to perhaps help promote your record or to even play on your record. There's so many benefits of community. What kinds of things does a label like yours do with or for your artists to earn the right to call them family? As compared to say a major label like Warner or Universal, who may not earn the right to call their artist lists family members.
That's a good question. I think, we do a lot for artists, to be honest. I mean, when you're in a small label, you wear lots of hats. A lot of what we do, it lapses over into management. So for example, we'll do a lot of artist development, put on gigs for people, we'll organize. We'll try and meet artists where they're at as well. So to give you an example, if we were working with someone and they needed their record mastering, or they needed artwork, or they needed to organize a photo shoot or press release writing and stuff like that, then, we'd step in and we'd help out with all that stuff. Some artists don't, some have got graphic design packages in place, some have got videos, they've got photos, and they're kind of on it there, and that's great. Yeah. But not everyone has. So we try and figure out like where we can step in and support, and, we'll work with the artist to try and make sure that the full package of stuff they need to release the record successfully is in place. And I think also we keep in touch with people a lot. We do like a lot of sort of networking events for label artists as well. Like we have monthly get-togethers, which we just do online. So
that's great.
Every other month we'll pick a particular topic that's suggested by one of the artists. For example, how do you approach playing live? How do you approach remixes? How do you tackle the realities of social media, that kind of thing? And then there's a lot of knowledge between the artists on the label. So they kind of share skills and ideas and encourage each other. And then the other months we'll do it's kind of like a show and tell. That's what I call it. I haven't thought of a better name for it yet. But where people will bring along like music that they have that's works in progress, where they want feedback on maybe the more technical side of things. They just want to show off something they've finished, and everyone will big them up and hype them and be like, that's amazing. So we try and we do all these things to kind of try and foster that community. Like we have a label Discord, for example.
Amazing. Okay, wait, I gotta unpack this because I feel like this is an episode on its own. You're saying monthly, this is a monthly Zoom call? Did you say monthly? Okay. Yeah. And sorry, I was taking some notes when you were talking, but you said is it every other month that you change the format?
So we do so on the even months we do like a particular topic.
Okay, so
we don't
you
always,
pick.
Yeah, the artists pick a topic. We don't always stay on topic.
Yeah, of course.
You know, the nature of these things. But we'll have sort of a loose discussion point to get us started. And then on the odd months, we'll have like the show and tell session where people will bring along works in progress. And people will talk about it from like a musicality point of view.
Yeah, show and tell is, I mean, honestly, there's so much benefit. Okay, this is incredible. I've got to unpack this for our newsletter because it is such a great idea. Whether you have 2 artists or you have 20 artists, it's such a cool thing. And the more artists you have, the better, because if you're doing it monthly, I would imagine there's a lot of artists who can't make it to every single session. So to always have a half dozen people there is you know, that helps. So I love both formats. On one hand, you have this, like, one person has this conundrum that they, you know, I just don't know how to book gigs locally, or I just don't know how to get up the confidence to, you know, talk to a band, to find a band member locally, or whatever the topic is, mixing and mastering. It's infinite. And for them to bring it to the table and have it openly discussed is priceless. And then the other the other side of things, what you're talking about is that show and tell. I mean, on one hand, at the very simplest form, like the showing off is just like artists need encouragement. They need a pat on the back. They need fuel in the tank. And I feel like we're getting it less and less these days because people are just, when I post about my new album on Instagram, everyone's like, it's so awesome. It sounds great. Awesome. Congrats, Scott. And that's it. That's like 1 hour out of the next 2 years. I'm not going to get any more encouragement, you know? So that's incredible. But then there's also the fact of like creating as a community and getting feedback. And when you play your music or you present something, artwork to someone, you see it through their eyes. Anyway, sorry, I'm distracted. This is such a great idea. Can you just tell me a little bit more about this? Like, how long have you been doing this? And like, what are some of the byproducts that have come out of these meetings?
We've been doing it about, I want to say about 1.5 years. So it's a relatively new thing. Like, I think people, a lot of the people, we work with a lot of solo artists. So the whole process of producing a record can be quite isolating sometimes because they do everything themselves. So we wanted to kind of find a way of connecting people. So we started doing these sessions about 1.5 years ago. And it's good. Like I always come up, and also I think for me as a record label owner, sometimes, the grind can be a bit depressing for the reasons that you've spoke about, where you're doing the admin, you're doing the social media content, you're doing what I think is the necessary but less exciting stuff. And being able to just sort of spend a couple of hours with a bunch of label artists from around the world and just kind of, also listen to what they're working on, which is always really exciting. And just kind of like soak up that kind of vibe and that community as well. Even I'm not a musician, but as a label owner, I find that really valuable as like a way of energizing myself.
Yeah, I never thought of it too. I mean, there's so many benefits. I think one of the ways that labels get in trouble with their artists is not, the artist starts to wonder, what is my label doing? Like, does he care about me? Does he think about me? If they're not getting any press or any coverage, they start to think that their album isn't in the right hands, even if that album has been out for 1 year or 2 years. But just the constant meeting on a monthly basis. And, I would say to our audience members who maybe don't have a bigger community, bi-monthly would probably be okay. Even quarterly, with the goal of monthly, because monthly can probably start to take a toll, even just in, that's a big responsibility. But I would imagine the artist would just see their label owner and hear from them on a monthly basis can really help with just retaining those artists in a way.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, people that we've worked with, we're working with people currently that we've worked with for a decade.
Wow.
At this point, we've sort of released everything that they've put out for a decade or so. And I always say to people, like, look, if you get an offer from a bigger label, then jump at it. Like, take it. Like, take that next step.
Yeah, for sure.
But I don't know, they just seem to be happy. I think we must be doing something right. I've not upset them too much.
Oh man, I just think that is a really, really great idea. And I really hope more people do it. Years ago, when we started the podcast, I was interviewing some labels from the West Coast, the Pacific Northwest, I think, in the US. And at the time, there was a collective of labels. They would get together. I doubt it was monthly. It may have been quarterly or bi-monthly. And they would get together in person at a club or a library or whatever, and just commiserate and talk and share and meet together. I don't know if that ever kept up. And there are cities where you wouldn't have another label nearby. And so, for you to do this with your artists, it's something that people could do in person. It's something that a group of labels could do. I just think it's so powerful.
Yeah, I think so. And even for artists that aren't on a label, if you know artists, just get together every now and then. Like it's such a useful thing to do.
How many of your artists on your label are within arm's reach, are local, that could get together in person versus are scattered and it needs to be Zoom?
Not that many, to be honest. There are 2 bands in the small town that we live in. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple more in like Manchester, which is our next biggest city.
Okay.
But apart from that, everyone's probably at least 3 hours away.
Okay. Yeah.
Which, I mean, I was going to say, that doesn't sound like a lot in US terms, because I know everything is miles away for you folks. But for the UK, that feels like a long way.
Yeah. Well, in Canada, US, the cities are quite close together, but in Canada, the cities are far apart. So yeah, I mean, I get that. What's interesting about these Zoom meetings is I found that before COVID, like a Skype call was very impersonal. There was just, it just was not real in any sense. And I don't know if it's because the technology's come along and the timing is great and there's high quality and whatnot. But I feel like after Zoom, I have a group that we meet monthly for something completely unrelated. We meet on Zoom, and I find it to be very intimate. I think that like the barriers have been broken down a little bit with Zoom, and yeah, I could imagine getting together at a pub might be a little bit different, but I really enjoy like meeting with a half dozen people or more on a Zoom call. I think that's maybe weird, but
no, it's nice. And in some ways, I'm kind of glad it's become more normalized, because we didn't really do online meetings pre-lockdown at all. Yeah. And we'd be working with artists who were pretty far away, but all of our label communication would be really long, detailed emails, which, I mean, is fine, and it got the job done, but like, it's not nearly as efficient as just talking to someone for half an hour.
100%.
And, especially if you've got a band who aren't necessarily all in the same place, you can just jump online with them and you can get so much stuff organized in a quick Zoom meeting than it would be able to do remotely. Like, it's just, I don't know why I wasn't doing it beforehand, to be honest.
Yeah, I know. This episode is sponsored by Zoom. Click the link below. I think that's great. What a great idea. Sorry, I got sidetracked a little bit, but I think that is a really, really great idea. When you talk about family, I mean, the family starts to feel less like a family the more that it gets relegated to emails and the less that you interact with people. I mean, a lot of the label people that I worked with have been my friends, but the ones that were maybe acquaintances or newer friends, there would be 6 months to a year where we wouldn't talk if they were in between albums or whatnot. Yeah. So to do these calls, wonderful. I think it's so wonderful. And you'll see an episode in the next couple of months highlighting this idea. If you're cool with that, I'm going to give it to our community.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think it was my idea initially. I'm sure that I got that from somewhere. So please do.
Tell me about the history of your label. If I'm not mistaken, it goes back to 2009?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, so the label is started and is run to this day by my partner Mark and I. We started off doing events at the beginning. We started off running club nights and gigs in 2009. We had initially looked at doing club nights, and then the venue we were looking at hiring were like, put on some bands, and we were like, okay, sure, having no idea how to do that or where to start. But when you just agree to things and then sort of wing it, there's been a lot of that at the beginning for us. So we did that for a few years, and then about sort of 2013, towards the end of 2013, we've been working with a few bands in a live capacity who we wanted to kind of do more with, and sort of wanted to sort of platform them and try and get them a bigger audience. So I floated the idea on Facebook, like you do, where you just like, I'm thinking about doing this thing. What do you think? And then a band that we sort of knew who were in our periphery just dropped me a message and were like, oh, we've got an album actually, and it's pretty much ready to go. Do you want to release it? And I was like, okay, yeah. And then the sort of process started there. And then there was a lot of sort of figuring out how that worked, a lot of learning, a lot of hitting up people that I knew that ran small labels and being like, how do you release a record? That kind of stuff. The first release came out in 2014. And then, before we knew it, we had a whole bunch of people wanting to work with us because we already had those networks from doing gigs, and the name and the brand was like there initially. We started off being very genre specific. We started off just doing sort of alternative electronic stuff like EBM, future pop, industrial, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then when we started the label, because our music tastes were quite eclectic anyway, we wanted to diversify. So we started releasing bits of post-punk. We started dabbling in sort of indie and lots of more electronica sort of vibes. And then, that was 10 years ago at about 200 releases.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, 10-year anniversary from your first release. That's exciting. So 2009 to 2014, that's a long time. That's 5 years was Analogue Trash a brand in that time?
Yeah, I mean, that was the name that we used to run the club nights and the gigs under. So I guess that makes it a brand. And then we kept the name because one, I had all the artwork designed. I didn't want to change it. Yeah. And two, because, it made sense to kind of stick with what we had because we put a lot of work in to build up the sort of events brand anyway. Yeah. So it made sense to kind of just expand it.
Yeah. No. And do you think that was a benefit to your label as opposed to just starting a record label as most people do, but to actually be in the music scene and adjacent to the record label? Like what kind of advantage or insights did that give you over those 5 years?
So we had the connections. That was important. Like we knew a whole bunch of people. That was useful. I sometimes think back and part of me sometimes wishes that I had started the label under a different name because we'd been running the events under a very tight sort of genre focus. And then when we started running the label, we were much more open in terms of genre. I think it maybe confused people a little bit at the beginning because they knew what we did from an events perspective and they were like, well, that's cool, but that's not what I'm into. So they maybe wrote off the label side of things or they were into the label side of things, but didn't know about the events and vice versa. And I think at the beginning, it was a little bit disjointed and it took a while to bring that together, I think, and to involve it so that people were like, okay, they do all these things actually, and they're not just this kind of very genre-specific club promoter, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, so then after 2014, how did the operations evolve? Were you still doing events? Like how, over the past 10 years, like what is the focus? So
still doing events, absolutely. We've done that the whole time, to be honest.
Okay.
We're more gig focused these days. Like we don't tend to run a lot of club nights, mainly because we're getting a bit old and don't want to be staying up till 5 a.m. anymore. I need to be in bed by midnight these days.
Okay.
Live events are still a really big staple of what we do. There's no substitute for getting in front of an audience in terms of promoting your music. So we do a lot of gigs. We run tours. We've done the odd festival. I still DJ quite a bit, but it's at other people's nights or at sort of like bar-timed events where they're finished by 11. So we're still doing all that kind of thing. But that's kind of run the whole time concurrently.
How do you see events, in-person events, whether it's a festival or a gig or if you're at a flea market or something like that, but how do you see that impacting the record label, i.e. record sales? Is this as a thing where you can tangibly see people go home and the Spotify numbers go up or digital sales on Bandcamp go up the next morning, or just the in-person sales are more exciting for people to take home a tape or a vinyl?
I think all of those things.
Okay.
Actually, I think the human connection is something that we really try and focus on. And you really get that at gigs. So yeah, if we do a gig and it's successful, obviously we'll sell stuff at the gig, which is really good. We will see Bandcamp sales the day after. We'll see people following the band pages. We'll see sort of streams from specific locations come along and sort of start to happen. Like, for example, last year we did a headline tour with a band on the label that I play live in called Vion. And we brought an artist over from Vancouver. She managed to get some funding from the Canadian government, so was able to travel over and do some shows with us.
Cool.
No one in the UK had really heard of her, but she was one of those people that we thought were amazing and just wanted to kind of help to get in front of people. She played a whole bunch of shows with our band, and then you could see it the periods after, you know, like the streaming locations, the Bandcamp sales, the fan base and stuff. You could see that sort of UK-based fan base was there.
Yeah.
And it started to develop.
As I was asking you that question, I was just reminded of a very sweet memory that I had back in our early days when we were all younger and more active. And I was playing house shows and our artists were playing house shows pretty much every Friday night or every Saturday night. And I always remembered I could always rely on the next morning after people woke up, sobered up, that there would be a Bandcamp sale of a CD or just a digital album the next morning. I just thought that was such a sweet thing that somebody was like, I had a great time last night. And then they look up the artist. And without fail, there would be at least one on a Sunday morning. I remember that. I missed that. That was pre-Spotify.
Yeah, it's nice. And I think sometimes as well, like, you know, if people are going somewhere afterwards, they just don't want to carry a record around with them.
Yeah.
So they'll order it the day after.
Yeah.
The experience of, like, I find still now, the experience of going to a small show and seeing a band or discovering a band or an artist that you really love, and then going and saying hello to them at the merch desk at the end and finding out that actually they're a really decent human being as well as a really talented artist, and then buying a record, I'm a fan for life at that point.
100%.
Like, I think, you know, that experience to me, I'm like, yep, I'll come and see you next time you play. I'll follow you. I'll buy your albums.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we try and sort of take that approach as much as possible, which is why gigs are so central to what we do, because you can't, I mean, digitization is great and online is great, but it's not the same, I think. And you know, to sort of get that fan loyalty, I think it's difficult. So yeah, it's definitely not to be overlooked.
You know what? It's so true. And I don't want to come off as sounding like some old curmudgeon. I know you and I are both in our late 20s. I can tell by looking at you.
Absolutely, yeah.
And but I don't want to come off as that, but you're absolutely right, because I don't think I have memories seared in my mind of discovering a record or even a CD in a record store. I have memories seared in my mind of discovering a band or an artist at a show that I'd never heard of before. But I don't have any memories seared in my mind of the algorithm presenting me an album. Even, you know, I don't have any memories of where did you discover that band? Oh, it was on iTunes. I was scrolling in the new and noteworthy section. And that's not to dismiss digital. I love digital, as you say. But you're right. I mean, it's so easy in this digital world because it's so easy to forget. And this, what an interesting, you know, theme that's running through our conversation is just these in-person things. I think we're really undervaluing them as a society.
Yeah, and I think you can translate that to a degree to online as well. Like, a thing that we've started doing recently since the feature became available was if we had an EP or an album release, we would always do a Bandcamp listing party. Because that experience, like, firstly, they're super easy to set up in terms of admin because it's pretty much all done for you. And that thing of being able to just listen to the album before it's released in the chat room with the artists and just kind of chatting away and sort of sharing that experience. Okay, you're not in person, but you're still getting that sort of interaction and that experience where you sort of getting to know someone. And it's still pretty cool, you know, and it's a really good option for when we're working with people who we can't realistically get over to the UK to put on shows. Also, you know, live streamed concerts via sort of Bandcamp and other platforms. Like, again, that became normalized during COVID. Yeah. But it's pretty cool, I think, you know, and I think it's another way of getting in front of an audience and connecting with people, even though you're not necessarily in the same place.
Hey, Scott here. I'll get you back to the episode in just a second, but I wanted to let you know, if you're listening to this and going, you know what, I've been thinking about starting my own record label. I think now is the time. I'm hearing all these people who are just like me, who are doing it and are having fun. Maybe I should as well. Come over to our website, otherrecordlabels.com, where I just continue to collect all of these resources. Most of these resources are free that you can download, including our record label toolkit. And so to grab that, all you have to do is to go to otherrecordlabels.com/toolkit, and you can download our record label toolkit that includes tons of resources like templates and checklists and a record label budget and so much more. Go to otherrecordlabels.com/toolkit. Now back to the interview. What did you tell me the meaning of the name Analogue Trash? I can't recall. What was the history of that name?
It's a song title.
Oh, okay.
It's a song title from an artist that I love called Area, who is from Canada. And I have, I basically would have been a huge fanboy of hers for, forever now, like since like 2007 or something.
Okay.
And I basically, when we were picking names, I was like, we'll just name it that because it sounds cool and it's the name of her song.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I like
and on the rare occasions she plays the UK, she always dedicates that song to me, and I always fanboy quite significantly. So
I would imagine. I would imagine. That's awesome. I started my label around the same time, 2011, around the same time. And I remember the thing that frustrated me, and as I look back now over, 15 years, as I look back now, I think the thing that frustrated me and bothered me was how the music industry was constantly evolving and how you couldn't really get any footing because this blog would disappear, or this writer would get fired from that newspaper and they don't cover you anymore. And then, you had Facebook, which was very easy and free to use for promotion. And then of course now, like, social media is moving a mile a minute. Things have changed so much. So I'm curious how you've adapted to that. How do you roll with the punches and iterate as the music industry changes over these past 15, 16 years?
I used to try and keep up, particularly in terms of like digital marketing and stuff like that. Like my day job is in marketing, so I kind of have to sort of understand how that works. Yeah, right. But I think these days, in terms of the music industry, I've largely checked out. And when I say that, that's not to say we don't do things like playlist pitching and trying to sort of convince the algorithm to pay attention and and sort of trying to second guess what will work on social media on a given day and that kind of thing. Like, we still do all that because you have to, but like, it's not the end goal anymore. So I kind of view it, for example, like that in-person connection, the human connection that I've sort of spoke about. Yeah, that's the end goal. Getting people on our email list, which, is our trusty email list that has kept us going for a decade, regardless of whatever social media platforms are playing at that given day.
I'm happy to hear that.
Getting people onto the mailing list is still a priority. Getting people to come to gigs, getting people to sign up to like our supporters club subscription scheme. Those are the goals, because those are things that we can control. Yeah. And the things that we can't control, like, I don't tend to focus on too much. Like, I don't tend to worry about building up Spotify followings or building up social media followings and stuff, because I've played that game in the past and I've spent a lot of time and money trying to build up Facebook followings. And then Facebook decided our page was impersonating someone and deleted it. So it's kind of like, I'm just not playing that game anymore. Yeah. I'm trying to sort of use those tools to funnel people away to platforms that we have control over and that are reliable, basically.
That's so smart. Can I just branch off for 1 second about your email list? I am an absolute maniac for emails. And how do you get people on that list?
Bandcamp is a big one. We do a lot of, we do samplers every year, and they pay what you want, or free if you give us your email address. We get people to sign up at shows. We do like...
Sorry, pause. Sign up at shows physically. Do you have an iPad? How does that work?
It's a QR code that links through to the sign up page of the email service.
Excellent.
I don't want to be trying to read people's handwriting. It's not fun for anyone. But so it's a QR code that links through.
Good. Okay.
So that works pretty well.
Yep.
And we try and offer mailing list exclusives as well. Like, we'll do things where we'll send things out to the mailing list before anybody else sees it.
Oh.
We'll do like discounts for the mailing list, competitions for mailing list subscribers, that kind of thing. Just little added incentives to be like, you people are special because you're on the mailing list. That kind
is
of
very cool
thing. Yeah.
When I talk about email with record labels, it's hard to kind of talk about this like lead magnet, this thing that like, what is it that, because to say sign up to our mailing list, only your mom's going to do that. Like nobody really wants to be on another mailing list, but like to trade something in exchange for their valuable asset of their private email address. A sampler is a great idea, but I love just saying on your website, like, if you're on this list and if you can come up with a cute little name for it that makes people feel like they're part of an elite club, advanced releases, that's so cool. I never thought of that. What a great idea. Little bonuses.
And I think as well, like people who genuinely are into what you're doing will want to hear from you. And I think people know that social media is not the most reliable. So if you kind of say to them, look, this is probably the most reliable way of keeping up with what's coming out on the label, what gigs we've got coming up, we're not going to spam you. You'll hear from us once a fortnight, maybe. Sign up. And yeah, most people do.
Yeah. And I mean, that's like, you're right. Email is just such a sacred tool. I don't know how the billionaires have not sunk their teeth into it. They haven't been able to steal it from us, thank goodness. Although platforms are quite expensive for sending. If your list gets big, it does get a little expensive.
It can, yeah.
How do you do you care to innovate? You're saying that you've kind of given up on certain things and you're just doing what you control. I want to ask you though about making an effort to try new things like non-traditional record label initiatives. So, whether that's like a new product, a new initiative, a YouTube channel, like just something. Do you have any sort of, do you feel a responsibility at all as a business owner to try new things, or is it better to just stick with what has been working?
We're always doing new things, and we've got like a lot of initiatives that we run sort of beside the label. I don't think any of them are that groundbreaking, to be honest.
Okay.
And they're certainly not things that people haven't done before, but like the culmination of them seems to be having some sort of traction. So for example, we've just launched a podcast, like an artist interview podcast, where we're sort of getting two artists on the label to connect, to like deep dive into their backgrounds and back catalogs and stuff like that.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay, cool.
We have this thing called the mixtape sessions, where we get artists on the label to put together like virtual mixtapes of their influences and stuff like that. We do all the sort of traditional merch because t-shirts and tote bags and CDs and records, they're eternal and people want them.
Yeah.
And we've recently launched like a supporters club as well to try and get like a subscription thing going on.
Let's talk about that.
I mean, I've noticed the move towards the Patreon style model is there. And I think there's a lot of people that want to support music, but they don't necessarily want stuff.
Oh, interesting.
And I think that is a pretty good option for them. Or people want stuff, but they don't know what they want. So it's like a label subscription on Bandcamp, and we do like a physical tier and a digital tier.
Okay.
So with the digital tier, you get everything and you get discounts and you get like exclusive content and that kind of thing. And then with the physical tier, you get all of that. But once a quarter, we send out a package of whatever we've released in that quarter, and maybe like some back catalog stuff and like some little extra goodies. So it's like a little sort of like it's like a loot crate, if you've heard of those, where you sort of subscribe to a loot crate and they just send you random stuff every month. It's kind of like that, but specifically for the label.
Well, and smartly, so that's what I want to talk about, because I saw it on your website, and one of the things that jumped out at me, because these things scare me, because you get committed into things, and then you end up spending a lot of the money you make through these things on delivering people product, and it ends up and then all of the work that goes into it, it ends up not being the fundraiser that you need it to be. And so looking at your thing and seeing $9.99, £10 a month for the physical thing, but not actually committing to mailing something out monthly, and instead doing quarterly or periodic even. That's bold. But I think that's cool. And it's also a bit of a surprise factor. I think if I was like you said, fans don't really want everything. So if I'm subscribed to something, and you remember when we used to subscribe to magazines and the new one would come and I hadn't finished reading the last one. So there is something nice about, oh, it's springtime and here comes a box full of goodies that I can enjoy over the next 3 or 4 months. That's a way better approach.
I think so. I mean, we keep it quarterly. Like, it's not like a fixed sort of date, but it is every 3 months or so, because we usually have a decent stack of physical stuff that people don't have. It's also cool from the label as well, because, if we're releasing a physical product, then we kind of know that like X number of those are already sold, because the people in the supporters club will have them.
Yeah.
So the challenge to getting loads of signups for that has been that our output is so eclectic that a few people are into everything. That's kind of the challenge for us, really. I think if we were super genre specific, it might be easier, but we do all right with it, to be honest.
What's more popular, physical or digital?
Physical, absolutely. Yeah.
I think about the digital, and even like £5 a month. Like I would only do that as like I'm donating to you and to your cause. But like, the idea of getting a bunch of MP3s every month doesn't excite me at all. The idea of getting a mystery box 4 times a year is very cool. So yeah, that's very interesting. I'm not surprised that the physical is more popular.
Yeah, and I think when people have signed up for the digital, it is that it's we like what we do and we want to support you. That's the reason why.
How do you? I'm going to ask you a personal question here. How do you manage the accounting of that? If somebody is donating $5 to the label, are they buying records from you? Like, how does the artist get a cut of that? Or is that just them basically donating to the record label as a charity, and then you're giving away promotional copies?
So with the supporters club, you're getting all the digital stuff released in the past 2 years. So I rotate what's available when you sign up.
Okay.
So any sort of payments that come in with a particular window, any artist that's got releases kind of represented within that 2-year window, we just split it between them.
Okay. All right. So that's fair.
Like, I mean, I looked at possibly doing it by like, okay, we'll divide it based on how many releases you've got and stuff like that. And it just became a nightmare. So when we pitched the idea to the artist, we were like, look, we'll just divide it equally.
Yeah.
It's money we probably wouldn't have had anyway.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And then with the physical stuff, it just counts as a sale.
Okay.
It counts as a sale in the same way as if we'd sold it wholesale. So at that kind of dealer price rather than retail.
Because the customers are paying £30 for each box, right?
Yeah.
So then that becomes pretty. If there's 4 items in there, you split, the whatever your label split is. So it might be £15 for 3 items. That, you're right. It ends up being $5 an item for the artist. However it works out. But that is very fair. You're right. It's wholesale. It's hopefully it for the artist, and definitely for the artist and the label. It's like you say, it's paying for the vinyl to be manufactured, or the CD or cassette.
Yeah, and it's getting the record into people's hands, which and they're paying for it, which is kind of all we can ask for, really.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think that's great. I wanted to ask a little bit about your online store too, because you have your own online store on your own site, in addition to Bandcamp, of course. But it's a big undertaking for a label to set that up, to find a host. There's usually a big monthly fee depending on how many products you add, how many features you have. I think you have to be at a certain level to afford a Shopify store, or whoever's hosting your private store. But it's also essential to be able to control your sales. You get the emails that way. There's no big 10-15% cut being taken like there is at Bandcamp. But how do you know? Can you tell me a little bit about setting that up, how that does for you, maybe where you're hosting that, and how do you know when it's the right time to set up your own store? to be honest, I'm seeing it more and more of labels who are actually saying, hey, we're going to build an online store here and maybe even eventually sell other people's products or other types of products. Walk me through that thought process.
So our store is hosted on Shopify.
Okay.
And it's actually not that expensive. It's like £25 a month.
That's great. Yeah.
For the store. And because I build websites in my day job, I can just do all this stuff myself. So there's no kind of outlay in that respect.
Very nice.
I built and launched the Shopify store at the point when Bandcamp got sold. Because Bandcamp is still like our main outlet and the majority of our sales come via Bandcamp. And I love it as a platform, but I got paranoid.
Sure,
because because we see the way things go when they get bought out by big companies who just want to squeeze as much value as possible out of it and then get rid of it. So I was kind of like, if Bandcamp goes south, then we're in a real pickle. So I want to go in place. For that reason, basically. That was the justification for it.
I think that's absolute genius. And I remember when Bandcamp got sold the first time, and there was a lot of fear, and some of it, the fear wasn't justified, and it did turn out for a couple of years, and so far, really, some of the big fears didn't seem to be justified yet. Of course, there was a lot of editorial stuff that I think we've gone missing and whatever. Anyway, the point is that going back to your point about email and going all the way back to 2009 when Facebook was getting started and it was free to use and you could promote incredibly well on there, and Twitter, you could post links and not be hidden in the algorithm. So it was just a really, really good business move to have a Shopify store already set up in place. $25 a month, you only need to sell 1 or 2 records to break even. Of course, it's going to be a big undertaking to set it up initially. But yeah, that's a really smart move.
Yeah, also, Shopify has a lot of really cool features. Like I sound like I'm a big advocate of them, but I think I am in some ways. Like it connects to Spotify, which is so useful because obviously we want to funnel people away from Spotify to actually buying stuff. So you can have the products featured on the artist pages, which is great. It links to stuff like Google Shopping. It does loads of clever things. So yeah, as a platform, like it's good. Like I mean, obviously it's a third-party company, so there's always that risk of, things just becoming more expensive or whatever. But I think so far, having that and Bandcamp means that we've got that safety net, which was the reason I set it up.
I think we're living in a world now where there will always be a third-party company. I know it's like, I think we can now we're all operating on Apple's MacBooks. I mean, those could disappear. Like there's, we're kind of interconnected in one way or another, but it's smart of you to kind of just make sure you have these things, especially as you grow. What an incredible label that you've put together. And I'm really more interested in the community. I'm interested in the community that you've built with your artists, and then the community you've built with your fans, specifically in the supporter group. Do you have a niche? I mean, you said you had a niche when you were doing live events, and then less so when you started the label. You implied that the supporter group might do better or make more sense if it was all around a subgenre or some sort of like very distinct thing that where people would be resonate with 100% of the content. Any thoughts on what the trademark of Analogue Trash is when it comes to the sound or the people or the geographic location, or how do you view that?
That's a tough question, to be honest. There's definitely a sound. Like we tend to work with a set number of like genres. Like we cover we cover a lot of electronic stuff. We cover a lot of electropop, a lot of electronica. We cover like post-punk. We do sort of the more left field pop side of stuff.
Yeah.
Indie and that kind of thing. But so the genres that we cover, they sort of work together in a very loose format. like if you listen to one of our samplers from start to finish, like it flows and it kind of makes sense. but yeah, so I think if you like some of the stuff, you're probably going to like most of it.
Yeah.
You may not love it. Like you may not love the sort of post-punk stuff if you're into the hardcore electronic stuff, but I think you'll appreciate it on some level because it's all under that very alternative umbrella. In terms of the people we work with, it's really just good people. Like that's kind of our only thing, really. Yeah. Like I think we just release cool music by good people, and that's what we focus on.
Yeah, cool music by good people. That's great. That'd be a great name for a label, a great byline for a label. I love that. No, I mean that totally comes through. Are you the one holding this umbrella? Are you the tip of the funnel, the general curator?
So decisions on whether to work with someone comes from both of us. Like Mark and I will sort of discuss things together. Okay. I do most of the artist liaison. And so I think because I'm the one who'll be dealing with a lot of the admin side of it, like sometimes it kind of comes to me. Like we don't really do A&R in the sense that we reach out to people. We did at the very beginning, like 10 years ago, but these days we just sort of see what demos come in.
Oh, I see. Okay. And you're accepting demos?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Always, yeah. I'm not the fastest at replying to them, I'll be honest, I'll hold my hands up, but we're always accepting demos, absolutely. And then it's a case of like looking at the next year's release schedule and seeing if we can fit something in. That's
right. I want to ask you, I don't know if this would be problematic, but do you show potential signings at a show and tell night to the other artists? Do you get feedback from other label mates?
Not in the sense of like, do we think this person would be a good fit for the label?
Okay.
There are artists who, I mentioned earlier that I'm not a musician. So I tend to approach things as like a fan. So I'll be like, this is amazing, like all the time. And I won't sort of get bogged down on the technical stuff. There are people on the label whose opinions I trust on the technical stuff. So I might show someone a demo that we've already agreed to work with and be like, do you think I should suggest to them that maybe this needs remastering? Do you think maybe we need to look at the mix on this at all? And then they'll maybe say, yeah, you should probably have a word about that.
Right.
And then, we'll kind of go from there. But that's part of like meeting people where they're at, really. Yeah. And I think like artists tend to know how their music's supposed to sound. So sometimes if they want to keep it lo-fi and that's how they want it to sound, then we'll be like, cool, okay, we can work with that. Sometimes, it's worth being able to have that expertise. So I'll ask them in that sort of sense.
Yeah.
Or maybe, for example, I've got people on the label who are really good at photography. So I might say, this artist wants to organize a photo shoot. They don't really know what to do in terms of like theme or composure and stuff like that. Could you have a chat with them for 10 minutes and maybe give them some ideas?
I mean, that's so incredible.
And then, they'll be like, absolutely. And then they'll kind of talk them through some stuff. And we're really lucky in that respect because, we work with people that have these skills and expertise and I trust their opinions.
The community of a record label is made up of artists, and naturally those artists all have different skills, different preferences, different tastes. Like that's often overlooked. What a pleasure to speak with you, Adi. I appreciate your time and congrats on the label you've built. I hope to see you around for another 10 or 20 years.
Thank you. I hope so too. We'll keep at it.
Thank you for listening, and thanks to Analogue Trash. Check them out and show them some love by going to analoguetrash.com. Mind you, Analogue is spelt with G-U-E. That's A-N-A-L-O-G-U-E, trash.com. And, take a look through their website and through their Bandcamp and see how they run their label. There's a lot that you can learn there. Thanks again to our friends at Infinite Catalog, the #1 solution for managing your record label's royalties. And thanks for listening.